Now, last week, Friday, the Minister of Finance, Sheku Fantamadi Bangura, read the 2025 budget before the House of Parliament on the theme improving the well-being and quality of life of Sierra Leoneans. The document, the finance boss says, sought to explain the government's budgetary allocation for the financial year ahead. A total expenditure for the 2025 fiscal year is expected to be 35.5 billion leones, with agriculture taking 1.3 billion leones, education 3.4 billion leones, and 15% salary increases for all public sector workers, while also projecting an increase of the wage bill to 7.6 billion leones in 2025. Well, so this morning to discuss the speech in its entirety and the document dubbed the finance budget of fiscal year 2025, we have Matthew Dingie, who is the country's financial secretary. He has joined us from the Ministry of Finance in our studio this morning. Good morning, FS. It's a pleasure having you.
Good morning.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've been here before, right? Haven't you?
Oh, yes, yes.
You have.
Several times.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
I'll start by asking this, not related to what we're here to discuss actually, but let me just premise or preface our discussion on this. How is our country doing financially?
Well, we are doing well. It's challenging. Of course, the challenges are always there. But looking at the reforms we've rolled out for the past 18 months in terms of how we manage our finances, both domestically and externally, I think the confidence is being restored, and we see the business community responding quite much so compared to the past 18 months. And so from our discussions leading to the formulation of the budget for this first half of 2024, we saw improved revenue collection. The NRA surpassed their targets for the first half of 2024, and they are on track to at least achieve the target for this year. And we also believe that with the reforms that we have made and the policies we've passed in the finance bill, which has just been discussed in Parliament, which are more for compliance issues, we believe even in 2025 the domestic revenue will continue to improve. On the expenditure side, of course, also we are doing quite a lot to rationalize government spending and make sure that at least we live within our means in terms of what we generate is what we spend. And the minister just recently issued out ministerial directives to his colleagues, to all ministries, departments and agencies, that effective January 2025, when this new budget comes into operation, MDAs will be restricted to spend just within the approved allocations for them by Parliament. So the finances of the states, I would say, in terms of the programs, the policies that we have put in place, I think they are quite intact, and there are prospects for growth and more development going forward.
The budget emphasized, restoring macroeconomic stability, but inflation rose sharply from 37.1% in 2022 to 54.5% in 2023. What, specific measures in this budget you would say are aimed to reverse this shock?
Of course, so that's why the budget is underpinned definitely from the macroeconomic projections we want to achieve and what strategies we want to put in place to achieve them. The statistics you just gave relate from 2022 to 2023. That's the period we are approaching the elections, and of course it's the period when the Ukraine crisis actually started, and then we saw the spike in goods and services, transportation costs and the rest that show global inflation, and of course Sierra Leone also was affected by that. But from July 2023 to October 2023, it even went further to about 55%. But by June of this 2024, it was down to about 30%. And by September, just 2 months ago, the inflation rate is now down to 20.2%. We are projecting for 2024 for inflation to come to about 14.9%, let's say almost 15% of GDP. And over the medium term, we want to bring it to a single digit. And of course, on the reserves of the central bank as well, given the resources we've mobilized externally over the past 18 months, we also expect that to also improve greatly. We've just got a program approved by the IMF, a new program that we see a disbursement of about $253 million coming into the coffers of government over the next 38 months. And we are also now eligible to also apply for a resilient, sustainability facility from the IMF again for about over $200 million. And of course, the World Bank, we just negotiated our budget support program with the World Bank, and they're going to their board in the first week of December, and they will approve about $80 million also for Sierra Leone. So with all of these resources coming in, we believe it will boost our reserves, and then it will make the exchange rates a little bit stable going forward. It has been stable for quite some time, but this will just consolidate that and make sure that, there is stability in the exchange rates. Inflation will continue to come down, and then we'll see that being reflected in prices very soon.
Now, the 2025 budget allocation speaks to diverse sectors, ranging from health, education, and things like that. One may want to know, how were they prioritized, and how do they resonate with the theme which says improving well-being and quality of life of Sierra Leoneans?
Oh yes, definitely. First of all, in terms of priority, we base the policies around the budget on the National Development Plan, which carries the 5 big changes, of course, from feed salon, human capital development, technology, innovation, infrastructure, youth employment and empowerment, and then of course public administration. So those guide the resource allocation as far as the budget is concerned. So you'll see emphasis is still placed on human capital development, on how we improve our education system, health and social welfare. There are lots of programs in the pipeline to improve on cash transfers and social programs for the country. And for education, we still continue to support the free quality education program. Health, the same for hospitals that have been funded by government. And on agriculture, which is feed salon, there are lots and lots of initiatives there to bolster production of food in Sierra Leone so that at least we can feed ourselves. And of course, talking about the quality of life of Sierra Leoneans, the team. So what we looked at, there is a hue and cry, of course, that the cost of living is quite high in country, and not only for Sierra Leone, but also countries in the sub-region.
Do you agree that the cost of living is high?
Oh yes, we are not disputing that. We are aware. That's why when we design the budget, we want to make sure we bring in policies that will address that. So one of such is to make sure, even in the finance bill itself, we have not instituted or come up with any new tax measures that businesses will take to pass on higher prices to consumers. So we stay calm on that. No new tax measures no new taxes for 2025 budget. And then at the same time, we looked at the salaries of public servants. You just mentioned that in your introduction. And to catch up with that, now that we're bringing inflation down, it's coming down to about 20%. You see, on average, people will be getting around 15 to 30% salary increase next year. So which means at least you'll see a real impact of the increase in salaries compared to the level of inflation, because inflation is coming down. So if you get 15 or 20% or 30% salary increase next year, it means you'll have a real value for your salary, so that you're able to purchase goods and services for the basic essentials that we need, food, clothing and shelter, and then that will help to cushion the burden of the cost of living for Sierra Leoneans.
Looking at the total expenditure, which says 35.5 billion leones, now what are the government's strategies or mechanism that they've put in place in order to ensure revenue generation, and how realistic are some of this projection?
Yes, so the revenue generation is based on the medium-term revenue strategy which we've developed for the next 3 years, and from that we've drawn up about 4 or 5 new areas which we've included in the finance bill for 2025 that will aid revenue generation for the government. So for 2025, we see that coming from 2024, first of all, a lot of new taxes were introduced. Now we want to see how we can consolidate that. But for you to consolidate tax efforts, it means you have to strengthen compliance. So what we've done in the 2025 finance bill is to include provisions in the bill that will get taxpayers to comply. If compliance is improved upon, I will tell you the revenue targets will definitely be met. So that's one key strategy that we embarked on, to make sure that people filing their taxes on time, they pay on time, so we don't run into arrears. The NRA don't have to be chasing them. So there are penalties that are now in the act if you delay even to file or to pay. So that alone.
Can you speak to some of the penalties, just a few at least?
No, the penalties, it means if you delay, if you go through the Finance Act, for example, if you are a small taxpayer or medium or large, it's in that threshold. So for perhaps small taxpayer, if you delay, you would pay like 2,500, or for medium, you pay 25,000, or for large, you pay like 50,000 if you delay to filing your taxes. So the penalties, again, they are there. It's not for you to say it's part of a burden of the business. If you comply, you don't pay. But we just want to make sure that you comply. And if you fail to comply, they are not that punitive such that you'll not be able to pay. But if you pay it once, twice, or three times, then you know you are not complying. Other measures can be taken against such businesses. So there are lots of reforms there in the revenue. We are digitizing most of the tax handles, from excise taxes, petroleum taxes, GST, and all of these things. Customs, we are improving their security system. So all of those will help to really mobilize revenue in 2025.
First, looking at the economic, situation in Sierra Leone, at the moment, a bag of rice is sold over 1,200 leones in some shops. Minimum wage is still stuck at 800 leones. How will this budget cure that deficiency going forward into next year, 2025?
Yeah,
it's a problem.
That's why we say the budget is addressing especially this feed salon. We need to, if you look at some of the achievements that the minister highlighted, production of local food has actually started to increase, and you see reduction even in importation of some of the essential food stuff that we usually, like eggs, and all of these poultry products that we usually import. Now we see production locally in the market is being ramped up. So if we get it right for rice production, because rice is the main staple food, and you see the policies and the programs that are being rolled out by the Minister of Agriculture and his entire team in the ministry to support farmers to really produce. So we are procuring tractors, we are procuring combine harvesters, we are procuring all the earth-moving equipments that we really need to improve on our farming, and we are creating the environment to invite private sector also to invest. So like the 2 agroecological zones that we've identified to support rice production in the north and in the south, we are trying to make sure that those roads leading there are constructed, water facilities are there, and energy. So you see there are lots of programs that have been initiated by partners that are coming in to support. Pledges have been made. Last year we were in Vienna in June, we are in the OPEC, Badia, and other partners have pledged up to about $500 million to support us to do real food security programs using renewable energy technologies. So all of those are now being implemented gradually. So when these things come into fruition, that's the time you will see huge production of rice, and then that will actually lead to a reduction in the price. But in the interim, we still have to intervene through social programs to cushion the impact of the, because government is not buying the rice coming in country, so you cannot control the price. But if we ramp up local production, they'll be able to make sure that the supply is high, the prices come down, and people can really afford it over the next year or two.
Before you came in this morning, we were having a conversation around education, and I'm sure you overheard the conversation just a bit. Yeah. Now let's move away from agriculture and come now to the aspects of education. Education is receiving 3.4 billion leones. Now, how does all of these funds will be distributed across the various levels of education, and will there be any sort of plans for infrastructural development? Will there be any curriculum improvements or sort of like trainings for teachers?
Yes, they are all there, both on the recurrent budget and as well as the capital budget. There are projects being supported, like for example, on the tertiary education side, in terms of infrastructure, we are doing the Kono University of Science and Technology. We have got funding from EBID, but there is a huge counterpart fund from the government of Sierra Leone to ensure that the university is constructed and completed. Of course, on the basic education aspect, we have the education sector support project funded by Badia, for which government is also providing counterpart funds in the project. You see construction of some additional classrooms in schools like Prince of Wales, government schools, Bow School, Kenema School, and then of course for the tertiary, Miltimagai, Eastern Polytechnic, and then of course even within the ministry itself, they are doing some infrastructure development to ensure that the administrative capacity is improved upon. So it's there in the budget. Of course, on the curriculum, teacher training, and all of this, it's all part of the recurring budget. If you see some of the policies pronounced by the minister, there will be reassessment. When you say teachers are being reassessed, it means they will have to go through some program of training to improve their capacity. And those who pass the assessment, their conditions of services, their condition of service will be improved, and they will get enhanced salaries. So that is also captured in the budget. And of course, teachers will also receive another 15% salary increase in January, which is part of the 3-year agreements that we had with the SLTU to do 15% salary increase for the past 3 years. So the last tranche will become operational in January 2025.
FS, I have observed that, so we have the Big Five agenda at the moment, and top of that agenda is the feed salon, no longer education.
Yeah.
But I noticed from the budget that, you know, agriculture, which is at the top of this top 5 agenda, is receiving only 1.3, and education 3.4 billion.
Yes.
How?
Well, yeah, so
isn't it an irony?
No, well, because human capital is still a big project for the government, right? And in terms of its coverage, it's quite wide, and the programs, and look at the number of beneficiaries that you are talking about. So it's a quite huge program. So that's why even in the, you have to put it in relative terms, in terms of what percentage of the budgets they are taking. So the benchmark really for education, human capital development, for education is to go at least 20% of your budget, and then for health, 15%, and then agriculture, 10%. That's the benchmark approved by the African Union for African countries to do, so that you can improve on these key sectors in the economy. So if you look at relatively what we are doing, education we're there, health we're about 11%, and agriculture we are moving up from 6% to 7%, trying to reach the 10%. So we are not that far away from the norm of 10% that has been set. So over the medium term, we believe as the feed salon program and lots of the private sector investments are not yet in. So once they are in, we combine all of that with the additional benefits which will come from that through enhanced revenue generation. We'll be able to reach the 10% to allocate to agriculture in the next 2 or 3 years.
Sierra Leone's debt burden has risen with debt service payment, you know, consisting about 25% domestic revenues. How sustainable is this level of debt? And if I should ask, you know, what assurances can you provide that the new borrowing for 2024, you know, will not deepen this fiscal crisis?
That's a very good question, and that's exactly the main challenge we face right now in terms of managing the budget, the debt. And when you look at the debt, you decompose it. It's the domestic and the external. We don't have problem with the external debt, right? Because it's quite small in terms of its size, and at the same time, they are mostly concessional loans, which means you have over 40 years, 10 years grace period to pay them. The interest rates are quite low because most of these loans are coming from like IMF, World Bank, ISDB, international financial institutions that do provide concessional loans to countries. So the only challenge we have with those is the forex required to finance them. That pressure is on the Bank of Sierra Leone, and that's one of the reasons why you see even the pressure on the reserves for the past 18 months, because most of these loans were maturing in the past year or so. The main challenge there is on the domestic debt, which we have problem with. The rates are still sticky upwards at 40%. So the strategy we are implementing in the medium-term debt strategy is also now to lengthen the maturity cycle of the domestic debt. They are mostly too short-term, 6 months, 12 months, 1 year or 2 years. So we want to see how we can expand those to 5 years, 10 years domestic debt, widen the market, and then by that you're able to bring down the rates. And then by then you're able to improve on the debt service challenge that we have. As we speak, like you say, almost 30-35% of our revenues goes to finance just the domestic interest alone. So what are we doing? One, it means we have to generate more revenues, because debts are statutory obligations. Once they fall due, you have no option, you have to pay. So what we do is step up the domestic revenue. That's why you see we are pushing so hard. And then 2, we are trying to attract more concessional finance like grants. whatever additional grant resources we get, like those that will be coming from the World Bank, we're going to intervene in the market and see how we can reduce the stock of the debts themselves. And by doing that, over the next 1 year, we've invited participants, the market players, we've informed them about the strategy going forward. So we believe in 2025, you'll begin to see the rates coming down, and as far as we are taking deliberate efforts to reduce the stock of debt itself. We're going to pay down. Whatever grant resources, additional windfall resources that we get, we're going to intervene strategically in the market to bring down those debt stock and then reduce the interest cost so that the debts can be sustainable again.
Let's speak to the theme, which says improving well-being and quality of life, as the budget's emphasized on. Now, how does maybe the ministry or the government intend to provide like key indicators, you know, in terms of measuring the progress of attaining that by 2025? Yeah,
well, we are looking at the human capital indicators in terms of poverty levels. We're looking at, disposable income of people. How do you, even prices itself of goods and services, especially for essential commodities, which is why you see rice, which we just discussed earlier, as a basic staple food. In the 2024 Finance Act, another 5% tax will have been added in 2025. But even when we went to Parliament, we worked with the parliamentarians and we were able to even delay that to next year, because we believe not much of the investments have come in to ensure that we ramp up production in 2024 or 2025. So once we can ramp up production and we show there's enough supplies and we have capacity to produce enough rice in country, then we can say let's protect our farmers and levy another 5% tax so that we can make the domestic production more competitive compared to the imports. So we are looking at that. So that will help to address the cost of living. And like I've mentioned, quality of life, it means social programs have to continue. And we have a lot of social programs in the budget. We still have to continue with the free quality education, the public school transportation system for the pupils, right? We still health, the free health care is still going on. All of these things are things where we want to make sure that the citizens don't take out of pockets to pay. Because once they begin to pay for some of these basic services, then it becomes difficult for the quality of life, especially the poverty level still not so encouraging. So NACSA is also rolling out lots of cash transfers programs, right? Cash for work and the rest, and other social programs which they will roll out in 2025. That will also help to target the vulnerable communities that they can provide those services for, and then make sure they get into some short-term engagements of work, and then they give them cash to meet their basic needs. So social programs will continue, social protection programs, and we are also looking, even subsidies, as they are quite still huge in the budget. Energy we still continue to talk of. The budget is subsidizing energy quite well, right? Even on the EDSA tariffs and things like that, you see how much we are paying to get the IPPs to provide energy to Freetown through the budget. These are direct subsidies that we are doing. All of that is to make sure if we are to pass that through to the public, then people will not be able to afford to pay for a basic unit of kilowatt hour to put on their lights in their houses. So these are the policies we are doing. But at the same time, there are reforms that the minister mentioned in the budget to address this, because they are not sustainable in the long term. We have to make sure that the EDSA, the energy people, there's investments in renewable energy or other sources that are less costly and improve on their capacity to actually, roll out and collect the tariffs so that they're able to sustain the generation and distribution of energy without coming to the budget. And that will free up space for government to do more in terms of service delivery.
One would say the 15% increase on public workers is a welcoming one. Now, but what are some of the measures that are included that speaks directly to youth unemployment?
Well, unemployment issues will come basically from the agriculture, right? Because that's really where the job creation is, agriculture. And of course, if you look, we see even our GDP has been rebased, and we see the service industry is also now doing very well. With technology around, a lot of people are gaining employment, but for us, we only look at just the formal way of being employed by an institution and say you are employed. but technology has also created employment, and that space is being expanded upon, and more services are being brought in country to make sure that people can create those with the arts, the ability to get businesses that they can roll out on technology. They are doing it and they are creating jobs. So agriculture is really the backbone. When these investments in the rice production and other cash crops, once they are really fully mobilized in country, you're going to see a lot. The agricultural value chain is quite, we are just talking about the production. When we go to the processing aspect, you find out that there is going to be a lot of jobs that are going to be created to process the crops that we grow, package them and bring them to the market and all of that. So the job creation is there, and there's a lot that is being done. And even through the SME programs, there are still jobs that are being created to support that.
FS, I wanted to ask, I'm not sure it's related to the budget though, but I feel it's apt that I asked this question. So you're the man in charge of this whole, money gathering, if I should call it, solicitations and the likes, and I feel you're in the better place to answer this. Have our natural resources failed us, given that we are still borrowing so hugely and not generating much locally? What do the indexes say?
Well, you're right, because that's the perception, and what we've seen for the past 30, 40 years. We've not benefited much from our natural resources, especially from the minerals, the gold, the iron ore, the diamonds, and the rest. We've not benefited much. Well, basically, one, we've looked at the model we have been using. It's more about giving concessions to private sector to come and mine, and then they just give us, like, basically the main revenue stream there is royalties. Because for me, you can still employ people, whether you're in mining or agriculture or anything. So you pay PAYE taxes. These are just the basic that you have to do. But the main source of the revenue from the minerals have been from just the royalties that we get. Community fees which they pay for the rent of the land and things like that. But what we are looking at is how we change that structure to get government itself involved in the process of taking management of the resources itself, so that government itself plays a crucial role on what the resources are, the value, if they are going to be mined and exported, how much will we gain directly come to the government as a benefit. So the structure we have set up now, which we call the Mineral Wealth Fund, it's a structure wherein government has set up its own statutory body that will now partner with companies that will come to mine our resources. So we ourselves will take part in the process itself. So it's not that we'll sit back and allow the private companies to say, you just come and mine and tell us what you export and then you give us royalties. No, we'll take part in it, we'll have equity in it, we'll have stake in it, in the mobilization of the resources, and we'll determine how we share on production, how we share on export, so that will bring significant amounts of resources into the budget, and we'll be able to even invest in more strategic assets or infrastructure of the state through those resources. So that is the model we are moving out towards. We know we have just started it by ourselves, and we know there's a lot to learn from it. So we've even have support from our partners, IMF and other bodies that have experience on how this can be done better and how other countries have done it, to help us look at the structure, shape it better, so that at least going forward, we should be able to maximize the potential of our revenue, of our mineral resources, to meet the development aspirations of our country, and not just leave it to private companies who just mine and give us pittance in terms of royalties.
While leading us well, I noticed that the budget highlights cash transfer to vulnerable in the feed salon program.
Sure.
Yet, you see, food imports still account for 25%, of the total import bill. How do you justify these lapses?
So that's what we do, yes. So we are just highlighting the issues there, and then you go later to the strategies to address the issues. So those were the issues. So that's why the strategy of the budget to address the feed salon is we have to invest in rice production. We have to de-risk these areas that we have potential to grow rice. And by doing that, we've got support from partners, through government, through the budget, to do those roads, do the access, do irrigation facilities, so that we can be able to produce rice in huge quantity that will meet the local demand, and that will help to bring down the cost of rice and make it affordable, and then the importation will definitely go down.
Quickly, as we try to join Amanda Ransford-Mackley, now attaining desired results requires collective effort. Now, how does the government plan to involve private sector and development partners in achieving these results or objectives at the end of the day? And also, the budget actually mentions allocations for agriculture and education. Are there any plans for public-private partnership in this sector to enhance the efficiency and reach of this investment?
Sure. Of course, the private sector, we are working very closely with the private sector. Even our consultative processes in putting the budget together, we have separate sessions where we invite the private sector to come and discuss their aspirations, what they want to see, what their challenges in the business environment, what can we do through the laws to enable them to operate effectively. So we engage the private sector, and our doors are always open. They come either through us or Ministry of Trade to engage us and see what we can do to support those that are investing in either agriculture or transportation, whatever industry. Of course, health, education, and public-private partnerships, it's also open. We see that space is quite open. We are seeing a lot of investment. Education is open. We see a lot of private investments in education, schools, even universities. We have private universities, hospitals, we have private. And then we have those that we partner, of course, to do it on a PPP basis, so that at least if the risk can be well shared between government and the private sector if they invest. The laws are there to support it, so we are just making that more implementable so that we can continue to attract more private sector players to come into the space.
Okay. Still with us, we have Matthew Dingie.
Yeah, a couple of...
Yes, and we do have a couple of messages on our Facebook, but quickly let me ask this question. Being the fact that the theme is actually emphasizing on improving quality of life. Now, how does the budget cater to the health care sector? Reason because we're still finding it very hard to accessing essential medicines, equipment, and healthcare facilities.
No, the budget really cares for health. It caters a lot for health. And firstly, in terms of the infrastructure, we see a lot of facilities that are still being constructed and bringing them in. They have been commissioned. I think in Western area alone, you see about 2 or 3 hospitals that have just been fully completed. And now we have provided support through the budget. The GMB hospital at Leone is now been operational for children. And then, of course, Port Local as well. The hospital has just been completed. Support from our friends in the Middle East. I think that's also now operational. So the supplies or the reagents or the drugs and things that are needed, these are things that the Ministry of Health is working very hard to make sure that there is always adequate supply of drugs in country. They have programs within National Medical Supplies Agency to procure the free healthcare drugs, and as well the Ministry of Health to procure the other drugs. And we have projects within the Ministry of Health, Global Fund, and the rest and other partners that are really supporting healthcare delivery in country. So I don't think they are in any kind of dire state in terms of availability of essential drugs in country. And even on the preventable side, we see the support they're giving to the public health agency that has just been recently formed. They go out to do surveillance and check whenever they hear about outbreaks in other countries. Immediately steps are taken to see how they can do surveillance and check the likelihood of such outbreaks coming in the country and take preventive action immediately to stop that. Oh. So there's a lot of programs that are there to support in the budget some of these agencies that are carrying out these functions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let's have some messages.
Bakar Rashid is saying, using money from lending to boost our reserves, how would that work? What about the debt servicing? Don't you think it's more inflation?
And Mosdi says the proposed all loans is in the trillions. Is that so? You just
Yes, go ahead.
You just stated that the government is spending within its means. My question is, how are you generating this income without putting more burden on the people who are already struggling with cost of living due to inflation and other factors related to high price of commodities?
Does the finance minister give advice to the government in regards to the frequent increase of the wage bill, especially in the context of government appointments in and out of the country? In recent time, we've seen almost every second day new appointments have been announced, and actually some of these and new positions that were not previously in place as far as the asylum government is concerned?
Namaste again says, good question, Victor Jones, and from the answer given by man, I think it's about time. It amazed me how a government, probably the only government on planet Earth, that is not directly involved in the day-to-day operations of its natural resources, but only receiving a minute sum of royalties from what is actually belonging to us.
These are a few of the questions. Do you have more?
No. Those are all the
Yes.
Okay, so on the first one, on whether we are borrowing to build up our reserves, like I said, these are concessional loans we are taking, of course, and they are part of our programs with these institutions. I mean, for us, because of our debt situation is precarious, we cannot even venture to go for commercial loans. So these are very concessional. So some of them are grants, right, that are coming in. Through like the World Bank, 100% of all disbursements is grant. So when those come in, of course, you use it to build up your reserves. We are also using our domestic revenue to build up reserves because most of our mining revenues are paid in Forex. So when those come in, you also use it to build up your reserves. So I think it's not just like we are just depending on external, but that's why we are putting some of these reforms and measures to make sure at least that we boost up revenue, especially on our minerals, and that will help to boost up the reserves. On the living within our means and while we are borrowing, I've told you that we have instituted policies to make sure that, especially going forward in 2025, we ensure that ministries spend within the budgets approved by Parliament. It doesn't mean because the expenditure is higher than the revenue, it means we are not spending with our means. No, there is leeway for you to get support from external parties, because the expenditure you are talking about at 5 billion is not all domestic expenditure. Some are foreign finance expenditure. So we put all of that together. So those resources come in and then you finance the budget. But how you ensure at least the limits that have been set for the budget to implement, we make sure that MDAs comply with those limits, so at least we will not breach our budget deficits, which will lead to higher debts in the debt financing and higher burden.
All right. First, thank you very much indeed. Just a few seconds.
Yes.
The teachers ultimatum to the government. Are there subsidies ready? Do we have money for that now?
Yeah, yes. We've paid the subsidies for third term, and now we are taking measures to make sure we pay the first term subsidies just before school closes down in December. So by end of this month or first week December, the first term subsidies will have been paid.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure having you.
Yeah.
FS.
Thank you very much for being
Thank
with
you.
us.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.